Hello everybody, I'm back, Dr. KK Aggarwal, President, Heartcare Foundation of India.
And I am Dr. Veena Aggarwal, Trustee, Heartcare Foundation of India and MD Medtalks. But of course, Dr. KK is very much with us. Great people like him don't go anywhere. He is with us, watching us, guiding us in everything we do, smiling and sending his love and blessings to each one of us. Today is the National Doctors' Day, a day that recognizes the contributions of physicians to the lives of individuals and communities at large. This day is celebrated to express our gratitude to all the doctors across the country who have unconditionally and selflessly helped us in the time of need. This holds increased significance in the present scenario when we are fighting a pandemic and innumerable doctors across the country are serving during these tough times in the primary and secondary care setups, as well as the dedicated COVID care hospitals. They are rightly called the Corona Warriors. Dr. KK used to say that he is the collective consciousness of the medical fraternity. It is our endeavor to honor his legacy on all the issues he believed in and fought for during his lifetime, be it the eroding doctor-patient relationship, saving the environment, violence against doctors, and many more. But most importantly, finding the dharma and purpose of our lives, especially as doctors. I want to take this opportunity to thank all our heroes who heal, who have not only served people selflessly through this horrific pandemic and continue to do so, but also to pay condolence and homage to many of those precious lives that have been lost while doing their duty. Dr. KK has been one of the biggest loss to me and my children personally, but for all of you who followed him ardently. I also want to once again thank the millions of supporters who have revered Dr. KK and loved him, as was evident by the outpouring of love and grief on his passing on. Chapter 3, verse 19 of Bhagavad Gita says, Tasmad asaktaha satatam karyam karma samachara asakto yacharan karma param apnoti purushaha. Therefore, giving up attachment, perform actions as a matter of duty, for by working without being attached to the fruits, one attains the supreme. Dr. KK lived his life following this very dharma and has found his abode with the supreme. For a man of his stature, a Karam Yogi, a Brahmgyani, the man with a stethoscope, so many euphemisms to describe him, we thought it a fitting tribute to start an oration in his name, Dr. KK Aggarwal Oration for a life lived with purpose. To give the very first oration, we could think of none other than Dr. Sanjiv Chopra, Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School, a much-loved orator and author and part of our extended family, speaking on dharma, happiness, and living with purpose. Welcome, Dr. Sanjiv. And to introduce him, we have dynamic Nalin Kohli, a renowned media personality, a lawyer, a face and powerful voice on television, and a very dear friend. Welcome, Nalin. Over to you to take this forward.
Dolly, for that meaningful introduction and touching tribute. I think we are all here today for KK, in a sense also because of KK. It's an apt day on Doctor's Day to take a conversation as meaningful as Dr. Sanjiv Chopra has outlined today in terms of dharma, happiness, and living with a purpose. I think that's something in today's time that has even greater value. And of course, it's a pleasure for me to be here personally and also to introduce Dr. Chopra. Dr. Sanjiv Chopra is a professor at the Harvard Medicine School. He's an eminent author. He's written several books. And I think what he's talking about today would be highly relevant in the times that we are passing through globally. We must also recall that this is a very, very challenging time for doctors and medical healthcare professionals. In the last over a year, perhaps several of them have not had time to take a break, to be with their families, to be with their loved ones. They have worked crazy hours, day in and day out, serving humanity, and several of them have laid down their lives in this process. That's why the term Corona Warriors is also used. So therefore, we wish everyone good health, cheer, we wish them well. And I think Dr. Chopra will be able to add a dimension to today's talk in the first of the series of this Medtalks from the Dr. KK Heartcare Foundation of India. So Dr. Chopra, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I'll leave you to taking our guests along in terms of how you're going to open this up. I had several interesting things that Dr. Chopra was telling me prior to this broadcast, but I wouldn't like to give them away and break his flow. What I can certainly say is that Dr. Chopra, and whether it is Dr. Sanjiv Chopra or Dr. Deepak Chopra, they are part of the Aggarwal family and vice versa. As Dr. Chopra himself says, that they are just simply been brothers from different wombs. So I think it's a very personal and a very, very, lovely relationship. And today's topic would make it, I think, fascinating for all of us to get something from something that KK would have loved to converse with you, but I have the honor to be there holding fort for him. Thank you. Dr. Chopra, over to you.
Thank you so very much for that very kind introduction. I'm totally humbled and honored to be giving this oration, which I've entitled Dharma, Happiness, and Living with Purpose. These three tenets are inextricably linked. And Dr. KK Aggarwal's life, legacy, were perfectly in tune with this. He fulfilled his dharma, he lived with singular purpose, and he brought happiness and joy to millions of people that were lucky enough to encounter him or his teachings, his wisdom. I was 12 years of age. I woke up from a nap. I was studying at St. Columbus High School. And on a sultry weekend, played a cricket match. And Sunday evening around 6 o'clock, I'm not feeling that well and take a nap. 30 minutes later, I wake up and I'm terrified. My eyes are wide open, but the world is dark. So I nudged my brother, Deepak, and I said, Deepak, I can't see. And he must have done visual threat and reckoned I wasn't faking it. And he started to cry. I have one brother and he's turned blind. So my uncle, Ratan Chacha, took me to the military hospital. My parents were staying in Jammu, Udhampur. Father was a brilliant physician, Army Medical Corps, and they wanted Deepak and I to finish our schooling at this preeminent all-boys school. So at the military hospital in Delhi, the doctors examined me, including perhaps an ophthalmologist, and I can hear them talking, hysterical. I was a happy kid. I was a pretty good student and a really good athlete. And finally, they get a hold of my father. This is 1961, long distance call. And my father very calmly says, tell me everything that's happened to Sanjiv in the last 2 months. They said, he's been fine. He said, no, I need to know everything. Any injuries, any new meds? Oh, yes, he had a laceration to his right thigh with a sharp object. 6 days ago, he was taken to the casualty ward and he got stitches. Did he get an antibiotic? My father asked. They looked and answered yes, told him which antibiotic. He then said, did he get a tetanus shot? And very proudly they said yes. And then he asked one final question. What kind? Anti-tetanus serum, ATS, or anti-tetanus toxoid, ATT. So they looked and they said ATS. And I don't know how my father divined it, but he said Sanjiv is having a rare idiosyncratic reaction to the anti-tetanus serum. Perhaps it goes 1 in 500,000 people. He has severe bilateral optic neuritis, localized form of serum sickness. His optic nerves are ready to burst. Start an intravenous, give him massive doses of corticosteroids. And that was done, and about 8 hours later, my vision returned. I can remember vividly the walls of the military hospital inside the rooms were all painted green. And the next morning, I decided my dharma was to follow in the footsteps of my father and become a physician, become a healer. So the word dharma from Sanskrit incorporates right action, duty, ethos, moral compass, authenticity, truth, and vocation. There's a wonderful story that played out in our country in India almost half a century ago. So the Indian government has gone around and inoculated pretty much the entire country against smallpox. There are a few holdouts, including Lakshman Singh, a farmer in the foothills of the Himalayas. And he says to the team, God ordains who will be diseased and who will be healthy. You cannot inoculate me, my wife, or my 2 children. So they go away, they meet that evening, and they decide, you know what? We're not going to let him stop us. We're going to take the police with us, and if he resists, we're going to forcibly inoculate him. So early next morning, they go with the police. He again says, you cannot inoculate me or my family. God ordains who will be diseased and who will be healthy. So the police pin him to the ground. They rip his shirt off. They jab a needle into his arm. The wife is screaming. The kids are screaming. Soon they're all inoculated. There's a scene, and the entire small village is awake and watching it. And he turns to the team and he says, please sit down. He says to his wife, make tea for them. And he goes to the back of his little hut. There's a vegetarian vegetables plot, and he picks the juiciest, ripest cucumbers, radishes, washes it, cuts it, and serves it to them together with the tea. And they go, what are you doing? You're treating us like royalty. We invaded your hut and forcibly inoculated you. And he smiles, and this sort of uneducated but very wise farmer says, I believe God ordains who will be diseased and who will be healthy. I upheld my dharma. You obviously believed it was your dharma to forcibly inoculate me and my family. It is now over, and you are guests in my home. And this is the least I can offer you. What a beautiful story. True story. It also tells us that our dharma can change. And we need to understand that. So at age 16, I was fortunate enough to enroll in this prestigious medical school. My wife-to-be, Amita, stood first in the entrance exam. At that time, 10,000 students applied for 35 open seats. She was first in the entrance exam. 90 people were interviewed. At the end of the interview, she was first. Parenthetically, I also stood first. I was first on the waiting list. Not bad, I was 36th, and I was on my way to fulfilling my dharma. So let's talk about happiness, joy, and bliss. Happiness is the sensation of feeling good, being pleased. It's an internal experience in which the goodwill is expressed outwardly. So you're walking down the street and somebody on the other side of the road is looking at their cell phone and she's smiling. You can tell she's happy. Joy is much more intense and exuberant, but it's transient. And bliss is the experience of intense joy, but anchored by a sense of connectedness with others and with nature. It's also been called perfect happiness and great joy. Now, if you want to witness bliss, all we need to do is go to a park and see the children playing on the swings and the slides. They're in bliss. They're so happy. 4-year-old stumbles, falls, bruises his knee. He's crying. Another friend comes, consoles him, and 30 seconds later, he's back on the slide and back in bliss. Now, all the research has shown that meaningful experiences surpass the acquisition of expensive possessions in creating more lasting happiness. So here you see a luxury car, you see a huge mansion, charity of the year, and then a beautiful scenic spot that happens to be Milford Sound in New Zealand. I've had the good fortune to travel there with my wife, one of the most beautiful and scenic spots on this planet. But you don't have to go there. You can go to a coffee shop and have coffee with a friend. You can meet a friend and talk about a recent book that you've read that has invigorated you, where you found amazing wisdom. In contrast, when you get a luxury car or move into a mansion, after a few months, it's a car. It's a house. Yeah, it's your home and you sleep there. Perhaps you entertain a lot, but you get used to it. And this phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation, from hedonism, hedonic adaptation. Now look at lottery winners. What happens to them a year later? All the research has shown that using a scratch ticket, somebody wins 10 or 20 million dollars. At the end of a year, they're back to baseline. Sometimes they're worse off. They have splurged, they've partaken in hedonic pleasures. Their family and friends come out of the woodwork and say, how did you get so lucky? You don't deserve it. Can you pay my mortgage off? The only lottery winners who are happy at the end of a year are those who have partaken of meaningful experiences and given away a certain amount, usually it's about 10%, to a meaningful charity. Look at the flip side. One of the worst fates that can befall a human being. Break your neck and you're paralyzed for life. You know, that happened to Superman. Remember Christopher Reeves? Superman? He was an accomplished equestrian. He was taking part in a race and the horse suddenly buckled and he went flying and broke his neck. And for the first 2 or 3 months, there's always this victim mentality. Why did God do this to me? I didn't deserve it. But he had an amazing wife and he was amazingly resilient. And here's what he said before the year was over. I'm not living the life I thought I would lead, but it does have meaning, purpose. There is love. There is joy. There is laughter. Rabindranath Tagore, Nobel Laureate from India, in 1912, he wrote a series of short poems, Gitanjali, in his native language, Bengali. And the next year, he translated it himself into English, and he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. And he's the one, by the way, who coined the term Mahatma for Gandhi. After Gandhi's 20 years of work in South Africa fighting discrimination. He's a great soul, Mahatma. And Tagore once said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. There's no greater example of service is joy than the life and legacy of Dr. KK Aggarwal. Now, Socrates claimed that his wisdom and insights arose merely in knowing that he knew nothing. Prior to his arguing it, it was believed that happiness was bestowed upon a select few. Who were these people? Nobility, royalty, poets, philosophers. And Socrates said, no, no, no. It can be begotten by human endeavor. And everyone is entitled to happiness. And that happiness and virtue are inextricably linked. The ancient Greeks did not use the word happiness. They used a term called eudaimonia, which literally means human flourishing. When you're happy, you'll flourish. So I've come to the conclusion that there are 4 traits of the happiest people on this planet. The first is they have a cadre of good friends. I couldn't choose my brother. I couldn't choose my parents, but I can choose my friends. And of course, your family can be amongst your best friends. Your friends are your chosen family. Robert Louis Stevenson once said, this is not Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson once said, a friend is a gift you give to yourself. Friends, they cherish one another's hopes. They are kind to one another's dreams. Khalil Gibran said, friendship is always a sweet responsibility, never an opportunity. Now, here's an amazing study that is still ongoing. What studies go on for 80 years? So this started in Boston a year before Hitler came into power. And they took 750 21-year-olds, 250 went to Harvard, the other 500 were from very poor dysfunctional families in Dorchester and Roxbury. And they followed them for 80 years. As of a year or two ago, 19 was still alive in their 90s. Yearly detailed questionnaires, physical examination, blood tests, EKG, C-reactive protein, cholesterol, functional MRI, home visits. Now a cohort of that original group, their children, 2,000, are being followed. And what is the major conclusion of the study? The major conclusion is that loneliness is toxic, that social connectedness brings forth joy, and that your satisfaction with relationships with friends at age 50 is a better predictor of health, happiness, and longevity 3 decades later at age 80. So I'm telling the medical students and house staff and fellows that I am privileged to teach, yes, you may have only 10, 15 minutes for a follow-up visit, but in the last 30 seconds, ask them, what do they do to celebrate with friends? And point them to either this book, The Triumph of Experience, or a wonderful TED Talk given by Robert Waldinger. Dr. Waldinger is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He's now the principal investigator of this study, and he's given a brilliant TED Talk, What Makes a Good Life? Lessons from the longest study on happiness. The second trait of happy people on this planet is the ability to forgive. If you hold bitterness or rancor in your heart, you cannot be truly happy. Anyone listening, if you're holding a grudge against an ex, a neighbor, a spouse, a sibling, a boss, my plea to you, get rid of it. And the moment you make that decision, you'll feel the enormous weight and shackles come off your shoulders. Perhaps the greatest example of forgiveness was Nelson Mandela. Can you imagine spending 27 years in prison? When he's released, he's asked the question, Mr. Mandela, do you harbor resentment against your white captors? And he gave the most elegant, eloquent answer. He said, I have no bitterness. I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. He also said, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison, the prison of the mind. Gandhiji once said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. So those are the first two tenets of the happiest people, cadre of friends and ability to forgive. The third I've derived from a quote by Albert Schweitzer. As many of you will know, he was a physician, theologian, humanitarian, and a Nobel laureate. He opened a hospital with his wife, a nurse, in Gabon, Africa. The Beth Israel Hospital, where I work, one of the two institutions, is a sister hospital of that hospital in Gabon. And about 10 years ago, we celebrated the centennial. Schweitzer once said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I'm certain of, the ones amongst you who will be truly happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. For those of you in the medical profession, reflect on that. What a privilege, what an honor it is for us to serve our fellow human beings. So I've distilled it into 3 F's: friends, forgiveness for others. But the fourth one begins with G. And it's not God. They're atheists who do God's work. The fourth G is gratitude. The word gratitude is derived from the Latin root gratia, meaning grace, graciousness, gratefulness, a highly prized tenet in all the major religions and teachings. I'm defining gratitude as the experience of something positive gained, coupled with the realization that someone else was responsible for that gain. I strongly believe that gratitude and compassion can be cultivated. One of the easiest ways is by the regular practice of meditation. But I'll talk about other very simple ways in which children and adults can express gratitude on a regular basis. Now, this is a landmark study. It's called the Catholic Nun Study. And in the 1930s, the Mother Superior at the Notre Dame Convent, 180 nuns joining, said to each one of them, on a piece of paper, write down a little bit about who you are, what you're looking forward to. And 60 years later, the researchers could authenticate the handwritings. And they codified them into expressing low gratitude and high gratitude. Sister 1 is an example of low gratitude. I personally think it's sort of neutral. But if you look at Sister 2, an example of high gratitude, you see the words, happy one, eager joy. So what happened? They were all 23 when they joined. They're all single. Nobody drinks alcohol. Nobody smokes cigarettes. They eat the same food. They live in the same convent. On average, the nuns who expressed high gratitude lived 10 years longer. Pretty remarkable. It's published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2001. Positive emotional content in early life autobiographies strongly associated with longevity 6 decades later. Now, here's a game that was taught to me by my then 7-year-old younger granddaughter, Mira. She's now 15. They live in New York, and they were visiting us in Boston, and we're about to have dinner. Mira says, Nana, before we have dinner, we're going to play a quick game. I said, okay, Mira, what's up? She said, it's called Thorns, Buds, and Roses. I said, I don't understand. She said, I'll explain. My thorn for today is that my cousin Ria was coming for a play date, but her father got busy and could not come, could not bring her. But she's coming tomorrow. That's my bud. And my roses are, Nana, you took us this morning for breakfast. Then you took us to Barnes and Nobles and you got me 3 books. And Nana, after dinner, you're going to tell us some stories. You know, you're a pretty good storyteller. Now you notice the ratio of roses to thorns, 3-1. There's a remarkable ratio, which is close to 3. It's called the Lasata Ratio. Marcia and Lasata's research led to this. When you say something negative, negativity is very heavily weighted. If I say something negative to a friend, I now have to say 3 things to neutralize it. So this ratio has been found to be highly predictive of success as judged by metrics such as profitability. And the ideal ratio is somewhere between 3 to 6. Here it's shown that if the ratio of positive to negative expressions is around 1, that's a danger zone. And that you flourish if it's between 3 and 6, whether it's college students, nursing home residents, in marriages, business teams, leaders. 11, interestingly, is also the danger zone. And I don't understand, I can speculate, perhaps these are people who are manic depressive and they're ebullient all the time, they haven't been diagnosed and they haven't been treated yet. So some ancient reflections about gratitude and happiness. Cicero, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. G.K. Chesterton, I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought. Gratitude is happiness, doubled by wonder. And Gardner, to speak gratitude is courteous and pleasant, to enact gratitude is generous and noble, but to live gratitude is to touch heaven. It turns out that there's a happiness formula. And you've all heard about IQ and EQ, emotional quotient. If you haven't, I'm going to introduce the term happiness quotient. That, I think, is more important in our lives for success than IQ or EQ. So studies, this is based on studying monozygotic twins and comparing them with dizygotic twins. What it says is that 50% of our happiness is inherited. It's genetic, set point. It's like the thermostat in the room I'm sitting in right now. Amazingly, only 10% is living conditions. Whether you live in the slums of Calcutta, the shanty towns of Joburg, or in a mansion in Mumbai. As long as you have a roof and running water. Those poor people are amongst the happiest people on this planet. And 40% is voluntary action. Things we can do to mentor, to nurture, to make others happy, to serve. But even the set point of 50% is fluid and dynamic. And we know that exercise, behavioral cognitive therapy, meditation, antidepressants will get us out of that to a certain extent. But the most important thing to increase that set point, which is inherited, is the regular practice of gratitude. So Robert Emmons is considered the father of modern positive psychology. He wrote a wonderful book, Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. He actually did a large randomized study. Large group of people, half of them were told at the end of the day, write down 3 or 4 things they did. And the other half were instructed to write down 3 things they were grateful for. Every day for 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, the set point for happiness did not change in the people who wrote 3 random things, but the set point for happiness went out by an astounding 25% in those who had written down 3 things they were grateful for every single day. So a very simple thing you and I can do. Buy a little notebook, put your name on it, call it your gratitude journal. We don't even have to do it every day. Let's say once a week. On Sunday evening, as you're reflecting on what's in store for you in the next week, look back at the last 7 days. So many grateful things have happened to us, and write them down. It'll increase your happiness. Wonderful book, The Power of Thanks, How Social Recognition Empowers Employees and Creates the Best Place to Work. So some years ago, Google took their top managers to Costa Rica, a beautiful country, rainforest, coffee, bird sanctuaries, for about 10 days. Bring your significant other. They got to visit an amazing country, have a lot of fun, get to meet colleagues they had never met before, other than by email. And it cost Google about $18,000 or $20,000 per person. In previous years, they had given a $50,000 cash bonus. The group was then asked, what will you prefer in future years? Cash bonus of 40, 50 grand or a trip like you did to Costa Rica? And an overwhelming number of people opted for the trip. Remember, they made new friends. They met people they had never met before. Social connectedness, that fabric is linked to happiness. The heart's content, the association between positive psychological well-being and cardiovascular health. Years ago, study in the New England Journal of Medicine. In Boston, the number 1 time people had heart attacks was Monday morning. Monday morning. They don't like their work, stress in the traffic. So there's a correlation between feeling positive and cardiovascular mortality. Now, Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days. If you haven't read the book, I recommend you read it. I read it every year in order to be inspired. He once said, happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. Albert Schweitzer said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you're happy, you'll flourish. You'll sleep better. You'll be more creative. You'll make better friends. All the keys to success. Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese monk, he was a keynote speaker for a Harvard Medical School CME course when I was privileged to serve as the faculty dean for continuing education at Harvard Medical School. Brilliant teachings. He once said, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. We talked about Socrates. I think the modern day philosophers are children. So I've given an iteration of this talk throughout the country and in other countries, including Singapore, Dominican, Kuwait, Canada, and so on. And I encourage the audience to ask their children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews to complete the sentence. Happiness is. This is a 5-year-old girl, the daughter of one of the deans at a college in Massachusetts. And her mother asked her, what's happiness? She said, what makes you happy? She said, Mommy, it's when my heart feels bigger. I was privileged to give a version of this at surgical grand rounds at Harvard Medical School. And the residency program director wanted to meet with me a week later, have coffee and talk about life. So we sat down. He said, Sanjiv, I have a son. He's 2 years and 10 months. And I asked him, what makes you happy? He says, Daddy, I'm most happy when sharing my toys with my friends. Now here you see John Lennon, the Beatle. At age 5, he goes to school. And the teacher gives an assignment to the kids. Write down what you want to be when you grow up. So he writes down happy on a piece of paper and he hands it to the teacher. And the teacher says, John, you did not understand the assignment. And he says to the teacher, and you don't understand life. 5 years of age. His mother, every night when she tucked him into bed, said, John, when you grow up, I want you to be happy. And he remembered that. Now, you know, likely, which country do these kids live in? And that, of course, is Bhutan. And about 35 years ago, the rulers said, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. They have a ministry of happiness. They track every citizen's happiness level each year. Year after year, Bhutan is in the top 12 happiest countries. Now, what some of my friends and colleagues have said happiness is being in the moment and being grateful. See, again, gratitude. Breaking bread with friends. A choice, knowing you have been good to others. When my nest is full, when my kids return home and I sleep in their own beds. No clinging, no grasping, no regrets, no anticipation. Just being in this moment as it is. Being content with what you have. Putting a smile on a stranger's face every day. Now, about 6-7 years ago, I decided, Siri has the answer to every question. So I had a brand new iPhone and I said, Siri, what's the secret of happiness? And it answered, it is unequivocally chocolate. I'm not making this up. It doesn't say so now, but it did say so then. And about a week later, I'm privileged to be a visiting prof at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Early morning, I wear my suit and tie and I go to a coffee shop, get my coffee, and I happen to glance next door and there's a chocolate shop. Of course, it's not open. It's 6:30 in the morning. But there's a sign in there and it says, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy chocolate, which is kind of like happiness. Now, here are the happiest countries. And this is 2013, but you know what? Every year it's pretty much the same. Sometimes Finland and Iceland are also there. Denmark is often 1, 2, or 3. And you can see Costa Rica is there, Bhutan is there. The USA is about 22nd. India is even lower. Now, this is a survey and it's a sample, so it has its own limitations. But what's unique about Denmark? They have national health care, free education. They work 30, 35 hours a week. But they also partake in a very interesting phenomenon called hygge. Hygge is informal gathering of friends in a setting that is cozy, comfortable, and convivial. It doesn't happen in America. I think it still happens to some extent in India. So if I'm in the neighborhood of a friend's home in Boston, and I'm going to go past his home and say, oh, let me see if he's home. We've got some extra time. Maybe we can drop in for 30 minutes. And I call him or call her. In Denmark, they simply ring the doorbell. And if your friends are home, they welcome you. You sit by the fireplace and you talk about life. No politics, no religion. Huga. It's also a phenomenon in Norway. But then I discovered something very unique about Denmark. Between the ages of 6 and 16, when children go to school, that's almost 10 years, every week there's a mandatory class, interactive, and it's on empathy. So they're learning about kindness, compassion, empathy, tolerance at a young age. Can you imagine if you go for 30 weeks in the year, 10 years, 300 hours of empathy? Something we should perhaps mandate in every school in the world. Last year, 2 years ago, went to Denmark on a vacation with my wife and another couple. But last year, they opened the first the first museum of happiness in the world, in Denmark. Now, although friends, forgiveness for others, and living with gratitude will give you happiness, happiness is more than the sum total of happy moments. And in order for us to have sustained happiness, we have to find our purpose and live it. Montaigne, the French philosopher, said, the great and glorious masterpiece of man is to live with purpose. Defining your purpose can come by reflecting on it. It'll come to you. Or by virtue of a key moment in your life. Often that key moment is harsh, it's stark, it's negative, but it is momentous. And if the person witnessing it has the fortitude, the grit, the compassion, and the love to say, this is unacceptable, I'm going to make a difference here, it becomes a reality. They start small, and then you know what? It becomes their calling. It becomes their purpose in life for decades. Most of us will experience sorrow. When you experience the abyss of sorrow and emerge stronger and with a clear purpose, you will have triumphed. Viktor Frankl talked about the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. These were in the concentration camps. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. The Buddhas once said, every life has a measure of sorrow. Sometimes it is this that awakens us. Now here you see on the screen, this gentleman who's smiling, surrounded by these beautiful children. He's from the country Colombia. His name is Jaime Aramillo, but he's a national hero, hence the term Papa Jaime. I met him 12 years ago at a leadership course at the Kellogg School of Management in Illinois. And we've become friends. I consider him to be somebody who inspires me every single day of my life with the work he does. And his story is that some 40 years ago, he's now about 68, 69, he's 27, 28, he's standing at a street corner in Bogota, Colombia, and across the street, there's a sewer, and there's an underground city, and about 200 orphans live there. And he's saying to himself, I should do something about these kids. And a beautiful 7-year-old girl emerges. She's looking at him and smiling. As they're having this interchange, a car comes around the corner, stops in the middle of the street, a window rolls down. Somebody tosses a toy. It's a yellow school bus. The car recedes. This girl has never possessed a toy. She comes running to the middle of the street, picks up the toy. She's looking at Jaime Aramillo, beaming with joy. And as they're having this interaction, a speeding truck comes around the corner, smashes her into oblivion. And he says to himself, this is it, this is my calling in life. He has now adopted, housed, schooled, and fed more than 52,000 children. National hero, Papa Jaime. So I said, Papa, how do you pay for it? How many staff do you have? Sanjiv, I have a staff of 150. I have a bakery. The only thing we make is cookies. I've convinced all the restaurants, most of the restaurants in Bogota, in Medellin, to have a cookie jar next to the cash registers. People leave, they grab a cookie, there's a shoebox with a slit. I get 50% of my needs that way. I said, wow, what about the other 50%? He said, I'm a motivational speaker. I speak all over Latin America and I plow my honorarium into the foundation. So I said, Papa, come on. I know what motivational speakers get. That won't cut it. He said, Sanjiv, you're right. Every time I need money out of the blue, somebody helps me. Every single time. He said, 3 weeks ago, I needed 41,000 US dollars to pay my bills. I go to 3 banks. They turn me down. They said, Papa, you already got loans with us at the lowest rate. Don't even tell anyone what rate. So he said, I'm coming back to the office and there's a street woman. And she recognizes me, crosses the street, gives me a hug. Papa Jaime. So I turned to her, I said, are you hungry? She sort of nodded yes. He says, come to my office. So she's sitting in the office having coffee and cookies. And he's on the phone calling 3 other bankers, asking for loans. And she can tell that he's being turned down. So she looks at him, smiles and says, Papa, how much money do you need? So Sanjiv, I told her I need 41,000 US dollars. She smiles and says, I give it to you. He said, Sanjiv, I said to myself, she's cuckoo. She's a street woman. But she opened her purse. She had $60,000. Her son had given her the money. She had to sign a piece of paper and move into a home. And she says to him, I've saved some other money. The weather's good. I'm okay on the streets. I can move later. You need it. Your children need it. Take it now. No questions asked. You can return it if you want, when you want. He said, that kind of thing happens to me all the time. He then showed me the photograph of some of his children who have grown up. One became a computer scientist. Many became teachers, lawyers, accountants. Showed me the photograph of a young man dressed in impeccable white with a tennis racket, flanked by Pete Sampras on one side and Agassi on the other, junior national champion of tennis for the country Colombia, one of his orphans. They've grown up to become nurses, doctors, surgeons, professors, been doing it for 40 plus years. And many of them are giving back to the foundation. But he found his purpose in life, witnessing the tragic death of that beautiful 7-year-old girl some 40 years ago. Joseph Campbell, who wrote A Hero's Journey, The Power of Myth, once said, follow your bliss. Doors will open where there were no doors before. The Papa Jaimes of the world following their bliss. Here's a remarkable individual from the country, Venezuela. Some years ago, only 2 individuals got an honorary doctorate at Harvard at the commencement, and it was Oprah Winfrey and Jose Antonio Abreu. He's an economist. He passed away recently. But some 40 years ago, on a lark, he took 9 kids off the street and taught them classical music. Poor kids off the street in Venezuela. There are now 400,000 children in Venezuela performing classical music. A troupe recently performed in Vienna at the Philharmonic. And the critics said, performance of the year. There's a similar program in LA, in Boston, and Sweden, and Scotland, and Greece. El Sistema means the system. And here on the screen you see Gustavo Dudamel, one of his kids, who at age 27 became the conductor of the LA Philharmonic. He's one of the most celebrated conductors in the world. So Abreu found his purpose in life by chance, just taking 9 kids off the street. And then it's grown into this massive effort in many different parts of the world. You know, Lao Tzu once said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Mark Twain famously said, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. Each one of us has a singular purpose in life. And if you live your dharma, if you're happy, but more particularly, if you find and live your purpose in life, you will have unmitigated joy, happiness, and bliss. Now, here's something interesting for us as physicians to know, healthcare providers. Having a purpose in life is associated with decreased mortality. Published in JAMA a couple of years ago. Here on the screen, you see 5 things, 5 statements. I should have said I love you more often. Should have had the courage to pursue my dreams and aspirations. I should have traveled more. I should have been the bigger person and said, I'm sorry. I should have spent more time with my friends. Who says these things? You know it. You know it at an instinctive level. These are people in hospice facing imminent death. They're going to die in the next 6 months or so. When asked by a nurse, what are your greatest regrets in life? This is what they say. Nobody said I should have worked harder. I should have had 3 Ferrari cars. I should have belonged to 4 country clubs. So the point of it is we should be doing this now. None of us should have any of these regrets down the years on our deathbed. Young people can find their purpose. I'm very fortunate to have met this lady. She was a pre-med student. Now, many years later, she does a health conference, innovation. There are about 2,000 participants from 50 countries. I've been honored to give the keynote a couple of years. When she was a pre-med student, she does an ophthalmology elective, and she's very disheartened to see people who've become blind from treatable, preventable causes of blindness. Who are these people? Poor people. New Haven, West Haven, Connecticut. So she goes back and with 29 other students forms an organization called Unite for Sight. Now in the last 18 years, they have seen 1.2 million patients, done 80,000 sight restoring surgeries. She has 4,000 volunteers, medical students, nursing students, professors of ophthalmology, web designers. She's doing some wonderful work with the Arvind Eye Institute in India. When she got admission to Stanford, one of the top medical schools, she had just started her organization and she said to the Dean of Admissions, can I defer for a couple of years? I need to work for 80 hours a week for my new foundation. He said, Jennifer, take your time. When you're ready, we'll be ready for you. An amazing young lady who found her purpose in life at a young age. Here's another young individual, Adam Braun, studying at Braun, top school, semester at sea, goes to many countries in Africa and Asia. And on a lark, through an interpreter, when he meets an 8-year-old kid, he says, if you could have one wish in the world, what would it be? And this young girl in an African country says, to dance. He says, come on, ask her the question again. She didn't get it. Same answer. Another country, 8-year-old girl says, my one wish for my mother to get healthy, hold my hand and walk me to school. He goes to India. He's mesmerized. He loves India. And he meets an 8-year-old beggar boy begging outside a school, again through an interpreter. You can have one wish in the world, what would it be? And the boy says, a pencil. He says, what? Ask him again. And the boy says, a pencil. He sees these school kids come out of the school, sit on a wall next to him. They open their notebooks. They're drawing, they're writing with a pencil. They're happy. They're hugging each other. He thinks his ticket to happiness is a pencil. So Adam Braun buys a whole bunch of pencils. In every country he goes to after that, He doles out pencils to poor kids on the street. He comes back to New York. He's haunted by the image of this 8-year-old beggar boy from India. All he wanted was a pencil. So he decides he's going to have a foundation, call it Promise of a Pencil, and he'll build one school in Africa. It's going to cost him $40,000. He has now built 554 schools across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. 113,548 current students. Forbes magazine has rated him as one of the most influential people in the world under the age of 30. He found his purpose in life with that one interaction with that 8-year-old beggar boy in India. Amazing young man. His grandmother is more than 90 years of age, a Holocaust survivor. He calls her Ma. She said to Adam one day, Adam, I thought you were working for Bain. Bain is a top company in Boston, venture capitalist. What is this pencil thing you're doing? He says, Ma, let me show you something. He goes to his computer, they sit down. First slide, these poor kids playing in the dirt in a poor country in Africa. The second slide, the first school he built. And the third slide, as you enter the foyer, there's a plaque. This school is dedicated to Ma, Eva Braun. And then the two of them saw. He's on the rooftop in Manhattan, New York, invited, and they're mostly older white men. He's feeling like a fish out of water. He's 30 years young, younger than 30. And an elderly gentleman walks up to him and says, young man, what do you do? And Adam says, I work for a nonprofit. And the guy thumbs his nose and starts to walk away. And as he's walking away, Adam says, sir, may I have your card? So the guy hands him his card and he writes to him 2 days later and he says, can you please meet with me for a cup of coffee, 20 minutes? And the guy agrees. And when they sit down, Adam says to him, I don't work for a nonprofit. I work for a for-purpose organization. We build schools for poor kids around the world. See, the word nonprofit can have a negative connotation. What is the overhead? When I donate $1, how many cents go to the foundation and how many go for overhead? 50% overhead? 70%? The CEO is making $1.3 million and flying around the country and playing golf for purpose. And the guy takes out his checkbook and writes him a check for $20,000 on the spot. This young lady is 18 years old. I think most of you will know her name and what she stands for. Nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She didn't get it, but will get it one of these years. Of course, Greta Thunberg. Political activist. In March of 2019, young people did not go to school and walked in support of climate change. She's spoken to all the leaders and spoken at the UN, at Davos, a brilliant young lady who's found her purpose in life at a young age. Now, your and my purpose doesn't have to be so daunting and intimidating. One of my dear friends, lovely couple, and they live in a neighboring town. We get together a lot. We've traveled. We've played golf. And I said to her, I said, Susie, what's your purpose in life? She said, my purpose? To be the best mother and grandmother for my children and grandchildren. To be a really loyal friend. To tend my beautiful garden. That's a beautiful purpose. So here's the conclusion of this talk, the Starfish Parable. This young lady is walking on a beach. There are 10,000 starfish stranded. She picks one, twirls it, throws it into the ocean, picks another one, throws it into the ocean. There's an old man sitting on a rocking chair, smoking a pipe, reading a book. He says, young lady, come here. What are you doing? What a waste of time. There are 10,000 starfish stranded here. Look across, there's another beach, another 10,000. Do you think you're making a difference? So she picks a starfish, twirls it, throws it into the water. It swims away majestically. She turns to the old man and says, "It made a difference to that one." So we can all make a difference. Let me share with you my purpose in life is to fulfill my dharma, to teach medicine, to teach about leadership, happiness, living with purpose, to do it grounded in humility and with an ardent desire to learn every single day, to express gratitude to my family, friends, colleagues, and students who inspire me in countless ways, and in some small measure, inspire everyone I meet on this amazing life journey. I invite you to reflect on what gives you the greatest joy and resonates for you. Take a few minutes now, if you haven't done it before or later, reflect on your purpose and write it down. You may wish to share it with your closest family members and your closest friends. It is my fervent hope and ardent desire that living your purpose, you will find lasting happiness and it will light up every day of your life. Now, here's Dr. KK Aggarwal. He fulfilled his dharma. He was an amazing warrior, a human dynamo, educated millions of us about health and exercise and nutrition, worked 16, 18, 20 hours a day. He was the consummate karma yogi. What a life, what a legacy. In the Rig Veda it says, "He who gives liberally goes straight to the gods. At the high ridge of heaven, he stands exalted." KK has an exalted place in heaven. And he's left an amazing and beautiful legacy. Today, we celebrate his life. Thank you so very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjiv. Those were several anecdotes and life stories of lives with a purpose. And certainly there seem to have been people that you've, in your distinguished career, met with in various parts of the world. Anything common that you find across all these varied stories? Of course, it's a life of purpose, it's a life to serve. But in terms of their background or anything that struck you as singularly common to every story, whether it's South America, the multiple stories, the United States, India?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think whether it's Mohammed Yunus in Bangladesh with microloans, or whether it's Papa Jaime in Colombia or Jennifer Staple in Connecticut, and I've met many, many other people, and I can tell so many other stories. I think what's common is that at that one moment when they were witnessing something, they had the fortitude, the grit, the compassion and love to say, "You know what? This is unacceptable. I'm going to try and make a difference." And I don't think they knew that 17 years later or 40 years later what it would have grown into. They just wanted to get started. And that to me is the difference between people like that and people who witness something horrific and then just sort of turn away. A friend told me years ago, he says, when you're walking down the street and you see a beggar, what do? I said, sometimes I give them money. I don't tell them, "I'm giving you money. Don't drink alcohol. Don't smoke cigarettes." Who am I to be judgmental? Or I ask them, are they hungry? And if they're not, I go to the neighboring Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, and I buy them a sandwich and coffee. He said, "What if you don't have time and you're in a hurry?" I said, "I just quickly walk by." He said, No. Next time, look in the eyes. Even if you're in a hurry, look in the eyes. Don't ignore that human being. And then later, if you have time, you can do something compassionate. Compassion is a verb. So I think we can all make a difference in small ways. The ones who have the fortitude, the grit, grit has been defined as having passion and perseverance for a long-term articulated goal. And those are amongst the most successful people. I think the most successful people are happy and they have grit. If you haven't watched this TED Talk by Angela Duckworth, based on her research about grit, it's worth watching.
So that's essentially comes down to the starfish story.
Yeah, true.
Single starfish. We may not need to set large targets or large goals, but
Yeah,
the first in the right direction is, after all, a step in the right direction to the purpose. That's exactly what you're saying.
yeah, absolutely. Right. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
But
Right. I think the other thing is it's very, very important for us who are in some positions that may be considered leadership positions to lead by example. I'm reminded of the story of Gandhiji sitting in his ashram, and the mother walks with her 12-year-old son. She walks 10 miles in the dust and heat. She says, Gandhiji, look at my son. He's gained so much weight. He's eating a lot of sugar. Would you please tell him not to eat sugar? He adores you. He worships you. He'll do anything for you. So Gandhiji looks up and he says, come back in a week. So they go away. A week later, they come back and Gandhi looks at the boy. He says, son, don't eat sugar. It's not good for you. And the boy says, Gandhiji, from this moment onwards, I've given up sugar. And he leaves the room and the mother stays behind. She says, Gandhiji, thank you for saying that to my son. But can I ask you a question? He says, sure. We were here a week ago. You could have said the same thing to my son then. And Gandhi whispers into her ear, at that time, I had not given up sugar. Right? You got to lead by example. Do as I do, not do as I speak. And one of my favorite things of Gandhi, because for us in medicine, every person in medicine, when you put your head on the pillow to go to sleep, you can ask yourself the question, what was the one new thing I learned today? And you'll be able to answer it. Something new or a nuance, something you already knew, refinement. Learning, what a lifelong privilege. And Gandhiji once said, live as though you were going to die tomorrow, learn as if you were going to live forever. What an amazing.
So one last question.
Sure.
It's been an engaging talk, but perhaps you'll permit me to combine your experience as a physician, as one who studied further and teaches, and you've spoken of today, living a life with purpose. Does it also, having these kind of happiness, having gratitude, having a positive view in life, following a good life, ethical life in terms of dharma, does it make an impact on healing in terms of the person being a patient through any chronic disease or otherwise?
Oh, absolutely. I think for a physician, a nurse, a pharmacist, a physician assistant, a nurse practitioner, if they're happy, if they're grounded, if they're anchored, if they meditate. And by the way, I was saying you should meditate once a day. And if you don't have time to do that, you should meditate twice a day. So I think if they're in that zone, they are going to be better healers. And the people they are privileged to serve will see it and feel it. You know, we in medicine are facing this enormous epidemic throughout the world of what's being called burnout. The rate of death by suicide in American male doctors is 1.2 times the national average, in women doctors, 2 times, in dentists, 5 times. What the hell have we done? How do we bring joy and meaning back into their lives? And I don't even like the term burnout. It sort of implies, oh, this guy's burned out. His colleague isn't. 60% of gastroenterologists are burnout. What about the other 40% who aren't? It implies that the person is at fault. Better terms that are being suggested, and I totally echo those, are moral injury. system-induced distress. So if we find joy and meaning and happiness and live with purpose, we will dispel all that burnout. If there's darkness in a room, you don't say, hey, darkness, darkness, get out of the room. All you have to do is light a candle, flip the switch, and the darkness is dispelled. So if we have burnout, moral injury, system-induced distress, we're unhappy, we can get rid of that by finding joy and meaning in our lives. And some of those simple things like friends, forgiveness, doing things for others, expressing gratitude. One technique to find your purpose in life, which I teach in a workshop with a brilliant spiritual friend of mine, Adrian Wilkins, we gave everyone who came to the workshop 33 by 5 index cards and said every day at the end of the day, jot down 3 or 4 things you did, and then next to it, give it a rating, where 1, you were miserable, and 10, if you were lucky, you were in bliss. There'll be a lot of 2, 3, 4, 5s. There'll be some 6, 7, 8, 9. You were happy. You were full of joy. At the end of 30 days, line them up on the table and strike off everything 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh my God, that made me happy. That gave me joy. You know what? My purpose is lurking in there. You'll find your purpose.
Well, I think that answer was a nice summary in terms of for Doctor's Day, in terms of the work also that KK, towards the latter part of his life as a health professional, medical practitioner, because we used to hear him speak a lot on these kind of subjects. And I think it's a good message for all those who have tuned in today. So we'll thank you for that. And I'll hand it over to Dolly for the formal vote of thanks.
What an absolutely riveting and meaningful presentation, Dr. Sanjiv. Thank you ever so much. It embodied all that KK stood for and believed in vehemently, and also practiced it to a large extent in his daily life. I'm sure all our viewers are enriched and motivated to adopt this in their lives and to make it more meaningful and start their own journey of 1,000 miles with a single step. On a personal level, thank you for all your support as a family through these very difficult times. I can feel Uncle, Colonel Chopra and aunties blessing us through you. And Nalin, you were, of course, your usual brilliant self. Thank you for always being there for us through thick and thin and accommodating our last-minute demands on your time. A big thank you to all our viewers for supporting and encouraging us in all our endeavors. We have a lot of volunteers who are associated with us during doing selfless service. It is an appeal to all those who want to join us by way of giving your time or donations to help us in carrying forward the legacy of our dear beloved Dr. KK and keep his memories and work alive. We have our website, heartcarefoundation.org. You can log into that and see what the work we do and see what resonates with you, and maybe you can join in that. To be happy is not to have a sky without a storm, a road without accidents, work without fatigue, relationships without disappointment. To be happy is to find strength in forgiveness, hope in battles, security in the stage of fear, love in discord. It is not only to enjoy the smile, but also to reflect on the sadness. Never give up. Never give up on people who love you. Never give up on happiness, for life is an incredible show. We would like to present Dr. Sanjiv Chopra with a Dr. KK Oration for a Life Lived with Purpose certificate. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjiv, for delivering this talk, and an appreciation certificate to Nalin Kohli for being an integral part of this oration. Thank you, Nalin.
Thank you so very much. I'm totally honored and humbled. And I think KK's luminous life and legacy will live on for generations and generations.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both Dr. Chopra and to Dolly. And good evening to all those who joined us in this wonderful broadcast.
On that note, we would like to conclude this session. See you tomorrow, same time, for yet another episode of Medtalks with Dr. KK. Thank you.